Interesting.
I know there are a lot of people that are like, okay, have a good weekend, see you later. I'm like, no, see you in a week. Like, what? Everybody forgets that I'm leaving. Senior project. I'm here.
Great show last night. Did you like it? Oh, I thought they were terrific.
Oh, great.
Really great song.
Good. I hope we didn't expend all the good ones in one night.
I'm always amazed. I
Yeah.
mean, not that I love every single
Yeah.
play, but
Me too. But
I think the quality of writing is really remarkable considering it's
yeah. Cool. That's good to hear.
with you. She was also in that other
Yeah.
early one.
Yeah, she do.
Mine says, don't understand the process at all. Seems we're flushing dollars down
You've never done it before?
the drain with delay after delay.
They run 2 or 3 things in, one or 2 down the side.
I do know. I don't like somebody telling me what I'm supposed to say.
Catholic, otherwise we have Catholic guilt.
Mark. Yes, we'll take this for Terry.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, 'cause I got somebody, I'm just going to lose it.
These two
Well, yeah.
I'm not even sure if these places are
Which,
read them, draft them, I got a script right in my hand.
and then after she gave me an update on
Could I touch it? The guy, his personal robot was dying, but it was a woman. And so there was one of us. It was very clever. And quite touching. And in the end, it was
That's not every week.
I don't know how he does like 2 or 3 performances a week.
Let's go, Matt. I haven't seen you in a while.
Okay, hello.
We got fun. Let's get started. Did you look through all this?
We just recently got this.
I have not either.
It is what it is.
well, the people said like an updated week 33 budget, and I'm looking at it, and I entered it into my revenue analysis. I'm like, how are we now $1 million in the hole? How much? I'm looking for $1 million. So I'm looking at it, and I'm like, wait a minute, you haven't reported revenue in your spreadsheet for 4 weeks? Oh, whoops. It's like, okay.
Martin, are we on the TV?
I just put it on, yes.
All right, so we're ready to go? Thank you.
I believe so.
All right.
Okay.
So, all right, let's go here. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Nantucket Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, February 19th. This meeting is called to order. Is there any public comment that comes before us that is not on our agenda for today?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Please.
My name's Donald Ryder.
If you could come over to the microphone because we're being recorded. Thank you. You can have a seat. Make yourself comfortable.
Just make sure it's on.
And make.
My back shoveling snow.
I don't blame you. And there's a green light that should signify if that's on.
It is.
Very good. And
The green light is on.
Take your time and chat away. Yeah, I'm on. Thank you.
My name's Donald Ryder. I live on Dennis Drive, and I sponsored the article, citizens petition for, I think it's number 40, for granite curbing on Hooper Farm Road the next time they pave that road. And talking to Tim the other day, Tim Savarino, and he mentioned to me that there was some misunderstanding about whether or not I still wanted to pursue the granite curbing or back off and agree to let them put in the berm, the asphalt berm. I had no intention of changing from what I had originally asked the voters to do, basically because I think it's a huge safety thing. I think granite curbing is a deterrent, as I said when I spoke to you folks, I don't know, a month ago or so, in the first public hearing.
December, yes, sir.
That I think it's a big safety thing. Aesthetically, it's going to improve the neighborhood. I had since found out that the town has been working to improve walkways like this wherever you have approaches to the school. It's been an ongoing project for a little while, so it seems to kind of fit in as well. I'm not sure how much else there is to say, except I'm not going to be here in March when you might talk about it. So Tim and I are working together.
Can I ask a question? So if I'm hearing correctly, is that you have not had a conversation with anyone from the Department of Public Works on this matter?
Not regarding whether or not we were going to
Okay.
agree to berm, no.
Okay. We did hear, I recall hearing you at our public hearing in December, and we did take an action on this article, and part of the reason that we took action on the article is that the Director of Public Works came in and had notified us that this project is part of the current budget for this year. And again, my memory is never very good, but my recollection is that your initiative was solved by her explanation. So we went ahead and, thinking this article was not necessary, have already voted on a motion not to adopt. But if I'm hearing you correctly, that's not the case. Correct? There has been a discussion, and you are not for the current plan of the Department of Public Works to put in an asphalt berm.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
One of my other reasons for thinking granite curbing is so good is that it's kind of forever. And looking at the plows running around today, I'm thinking that berm's going to come up like a little bit of butter on the side of the road, and you're going to have to fix it again. And that probably won't happen. But.
Okay. No, I understand. Any questions before I go on?
I mean, I just seem to recall that there was also some discussion, it wasn't in the public hearing, you mentioned a safety issue. I think there was again, I'm not an expert, but I seem to remember some other folks had differing opinions as to whether granite versus a asphalt berm was more or less safe and what it could impact. So I seem to remember there were some people who expressed an opinion opposite to yours, sir. So.
Mine's certainly not a professional opinion. I just know that I used to drive around the island a lot. I just retired from National Grid, and I worked there for 44 years, and I read meters. And if you get caught by one of those berms, to me it felt like it sucked me up onto the road, almost like instead of kicking me away. Again, not a professional opinion, just my observation. And
Okay.
that's why I say safety.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thinking of Steve. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if it's appropriate to invite Kara back here to sort of explain the safety benefits of one type of berm over the other, and maybe some clarification on what I thought the conversation was that we had at the time she was last here. Not the last time she was in front of the committee, but the last time we discussed this issue, because it seems, I think I misunderstood what she was saying at that time.
Okay. That would seem to be appropriate. I think we could do that. Yeah, 'cause certainly we want to be transparent and make sure we have all information from both sides before we move ahead. So that seems reasonably quick. Jim, and then Chris.
My comment is if there's any kind of miscommunication,
We can do that here. that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Christie?
I think Steve's point, I think if we get Kara back in, it would be a good idea, because, they just redid the sidewalk on Nobodere Farm Road, which I think is granite curbing. That also was a pretty long run, and I would like to know how do they determine what gets a berm and what gets a curb?
Okay. All right, why don't we do this? I think that certainly is all good comments. I will reach out to Kara, and we'll put this specific item back on an agenda for March 2nd, if we can, and we'll discuss this further, and you're certainly welcome to come back at that time, and we will let you know when we'll be on, what specific meeting we'll be on.
Thank you. I have plans to be off island.
Oh, good
that
for you.
week. But the neighborhood's gotten together, and we've talked a bit, and Tim would represent our ideas at that meeting, and that's...
Mrs. Savarino, well, we all recognize that young fella. Sure. That would be fine. That'd be fine.
Okay, great.
All right, well, very good. So we'll go ahead and do that, and move that along. Thank you for coming in.
And as I said, I think in the article when I wrote it was Vespa Lane is another example of a sidewalk that came out aesthetically very nice, I think, with this granite curbing. Thanks, gentlemen.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Have a safe trip.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment today? Anything on our agenda? All right, hearing none. The next item, approval of minutes. I have not seen anything for February 17th, so we'll put that on off. Any committee reports today? I do not have any. And then moving along, review of the Health and Human Services funding allocations. You did receive in your packet information on this, and also some information that I believe you've all gotten today on the Family and Children's Services, some financial statements, and a little more specific information. Does everybody have that? I'll be sure we'll move forward.
I need to recuse myself from this conversation.
Okay.
One of the grantees is the hospital.
Okay. And with that said, I'd like to recognize Rachel Grecian for coming in, and the chairman of the Contract Review Committee, Dorothy Hertz, and our representative, Christy Kickham. And I don't know who would want to present, but the only thing I would ask, if you could come up to a microphone, make yourself comfortable for us, and we can go from there.
You can come up and support.
Yeah, you can come support me.
Well, Rachel, if you have questions, we're going to answer.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, thank you for providing this information. The floor is yours. So, and would you like to take questions as we go along, or would you rather wait till you're done with your presentation?
I think that you could ask questions as we go along. It might be easiest.
Okay, very good.
I think what I would like to say, if you've read the report, what we have seen, and we did a lot of work this year in trying to give you a more accurate idea of what we were actually servicing on the island. It was a question that came up last year. So a lot of work was done into finding out actually the population of the island and its demographics. And I believe you can find that in the report. What it does show was sort of surprising to us was the exact number of people that might actually be living here in comparison to the actual U.S. Census. The town census puts us well above, over 2,000 people above the federal census, and yet if you look at the adage that is done by Massachusetts town clerks, it could put us at about 17,000. The school, if you take the voting population and the school population, you put them together, we're well over the federal census anyway. And then you start taking into statistics as to how many children are being born to parents of both are American citizens. We're looking at only 1/3 of the population that's being born are that. So it does let us know that the numbers that we might have in the U.S. Census just do not jive. And yet the needs for the services have not decreased. The needs for, as we all know, we have a major problem, drug issue going on the island. We have in cases with even Safe Place has had an increase in their phone call, their hotline, I think it was 41%. They've had a 19% increase in sessions that they have with one-on-one sessions going on. And some of the cases are actually quite brutal that we're reading about in our papers. The mental health issues are issues with suicides are drastically high. We're also looking at situations with economically for people on the island. And what we looked at this year, we really put a lot of effort into seeing how direct services are being met and trying to make sure that we were supporting direct services that were making a difference. And so if you look on to our recommendations, and I would like to make one clarification on the recommendations because there is an error. In the final, it says fiscal year 2015 CRC recommendations. It should say 2016 CRC recommendations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And on some of these, we did actually put a few clauses onto some of our stipulations onto some of the contracts this coming year, so that we felt we would like to better monitor those contracts themselves. So if you look at the funding recommendations under the requests, we have dedicated $50,000 to, out of a request of $50,000, we are saying that we support the $50,000 going to Safe Place. ASAP, who made the request of $67,500, we are recommending the $67,500. That $67,500 has gone to the program Heart to Heart during Red Ribbon Week. All the services that ASAP provides for Red Ribbon Week. Elderly Services of Cape Cod was we kept it to $13,000, which is the request they made. Family Planning, we did take an increase in it, but Family Planning has actually moved a full-time position into place and are now providing a much more detailed services. They're providing both social services in WIC. They're helping people with food stamps. They're actually take male clients, because it's actually not family planning, it's actually healthy imperatives. They're seeing all age groups. They see clients that do not have insurance. They see clients that do have insurance. So as their role in reaching out and providing more services to people, we're seeing as to being a much greater aspect of them doing it. Family and Children's Services. After we've spent a lot of time on this, an awful lot of time, and finally met with Brian came to our meeting. We had their financial officer come, their auditor come and meet with us, and we are going with the $100,000 of the $110,000 that they requested. Martha's Vineyards Services, we're staying at the $12,000. Legal Services made a request for $41,200, and we are staying at that. Rental Assistance made a request for $40,000, and we're giving them $25,000. The Food Pantry made a request for $40,000, and we're going to $35,000. The hospital made a request for $62,170. We're going to $57,170. The Access Nantucket made a request for $53,440. We're giving them. Our recommendation is $15,000. Small Friends made a request for $10,000, and our recommendation is $7,000. No, Safe Place doesn't have a stipulation. Yeah, the stars should probably not be next to them, because those do not, the ones that have stars do not mean that they have stipulations. stipulations are being put on Family and Children's Services. A stipulation is also being put on to Small Friends, and a stipulation was put on to Access Nantucket.
Very good. Any questions so far? Okay, thank you. Very good.
Can I?
Oh, Joe, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, in terms of these grants from the town, right? For all these organizations, do these grants account for, I mean, what sort of percentage of these organizations' charitable support or revenues do these grants make up? I mean, it looks like on Family and Children's Services, it's 100,000 out of, I forget, $300,000 of grants or something that comes. I don't know if, I guess what I'm trying to get to is, does the town account for a majority of support for any of these particular charities, or or is the town always sort of 10, 20% or whatever? Do you have any sense as to how, of that sort of proportion?
Well, it changes with some of them. Let's say the one for family planning or health imperatives. The $24,000 that we request, or they're requesting, is of their budget. Their budget to run the Nantucket office is $175,000, and they asked $24,000 for us. They get federal grants, and they get state grants to run that. So it actually isn't run. From what we understand, they're actually running it not at. They actually lose money running this, but they feel it's an area where they need to run it. Legal services, actually all we're doing is paying for their plane to come over, their plane tickets to come over. And they see 8 to 10 clients. So when we look at that, they get federal grants too, federal and state grants. So it's very little of their cost. Same with elderly services. It's not a large portion of their grant money. They get federal and state grants for them. ASAP is now been awarded a $125,000 a year grant, which they have to match in order to keep the grant, and that's to run a lot of their other programs. Safe Place, I could.
So now that all these other organizations have other sources of funds, I guess what I'm getting at, and the town is a component of their funding sources, not the majority in any one case.
We are not the majority in any one case.
Okay.
Except for Family and Children's right now. They are looking for other grants. They're looking for a tower grant. They're actually working on another grant through the Department of Mental Health, which somebody else will be the carrier of the grant, and they will do the paperwork for them, basically, and the money will go through them. But as far as big grants right now, ours is the biggest.
Town would be the biggest.
Yeah, Joe, just to add to the answer there, to your question, if you look back in the history, which is this document here, you'll notice that a lot of these services that used to receive funds back in the day used to get a lot more than what they're getting now. And I think over the past years, you shoot high with the request, and hopefully you'll get it or something close to. And I think through the work of the Contract Review Committee, we've gotten to the point where these services request really what they need. As far as, it doesn't answer the percent exactly, because as Dorothy said, it varies with each one. But so I think we've gotten it to a point to where I think they're requesting legitimately what they need and not overshooting. So it's just a little addition.
And certainly the $350,000 total that's being requested is in an effort to sort of move back to levels that were funded prior to the downturn in 2008, right? I mean, there was sort of this thing going on, right, in terms of this budget item, right?
I think that it's always a reflection of how the town feels for the social needs programs.
Right.
So sure, I think in good times it certainly can go up.
But I think it's less returning to the numbers in 2008 as far as it's more reacting to the current numbers in the human services. And I think that, I think the committee is very good. If you look at our allocation over the past few years, we have pretty stable amounts going over the years. And we do our best to stay within that amount. And I think when we really see a need is when we ask for a request. But we're pretty good at hitting that number. And feeling like we have served each committee, each service, as far as providing a supplement.
Greg,
Yeah, Dorothy, you mentioned, was it this Brian that met with?
He met with us with Family and Children's and their
Great.
accountant.
And perhaps Brian, because there were concerns in the years past as far as how things were operated at Family and Children's Services. What was your impression in meeting with the folks there?
Brian, may I ask you, mind coming to the microphone? Sorry.
No.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So essentially, my impression was that, because I was involved in some of the meetings in early July when there were a lot of questions about where they were, how they were doing, was that they have done a significant amount of work in a very short period of time to turn things around. And they had the auditor there, and he actually is going to be sending me, there was some information that I had asked for that he's going to be sending to us based on the number of journal entries they had to do relative to the audit, because it certainly, from last year's audit to this year's audit, was a tremendous turnaround, and even from some of the documents that they had given to us when they were saying that they may need money. So I'm comfortable with what they have in place right now, and I know there was mention of a contract stipulation, which I had recommended to the committee that they provide quarterly reports, about both balance sheet and P&L, to be reviewed by the town with any analysis on any significant deviations, so that we can just be cognizant of what's going on. So, provided they were, I'm assuming they were comfortable with that, right? Or they appeared to be when I talked to them about it.
Actually, yes, they were. We added one other stipulation to it.
Okay.
Or two. Sorry.
Okay. So with that, at least from my perspective, with that, them being comfortable with that provision, then I'm comfortable with where they're at this point and how they're moving forward.
Thank you. Did you want to add?
I think Rachel.
Oh, Rachel, you want to add?
Discuss the two.
Those three, so there was the quarterly reports that now include the profit and loss that Brian will help analyze and review to make sure that they are still in a healthy settlement. If not, there will be a termination language added in there to end further funding within the year. There was also a request that the report that they normally give on the numbers be a bit more detailed, rather than just we've served 5 people on a sliding scale, maybe a little bit more of an understanding on what the sliding scale was, so you have a better understanding on, was it 0, was it 100, things like that. Well, there is another group that does provide that level of detail, so we felt that that would be necessary. And then they had a management response to their most recent audit, that the responses have not been formalized or received yet, and we are requesting, they are requesting that.
Always.
So that when it is formalized, it will be provided to the contract review committee.
There's one question I have as a follow-up. It says 6-7 months ago they were dire financial, and unfortunately I'm involved. They were looking for some significant amount of money, and all of a sudden they heard another word. And the assumption can be made that they were, listening to what you're saying, is that they got things in order and that really wasn't necessary, or they still one step away from.
I don't think, based on the 14 audit, that they're one step away from anything. I think that there was, with the amount of, in my opinion, after reading this, and I don't want to speak for any of them by any means, but after reviewing it and reading it and talking to the auditor, I think it was more, there had been so much turnover that they really were, they just needed somebody to be able to sit there and comb through everything and put it all together, more than anything, to be quite honest with you, in my opinion, based on, from what I saw in the audit, because the audit as everybody I think has, reflects a significant surplus at the end of the year when they were telling us at the end of 14 that they were in significant trouble. So I think some of it stemmed from the fact that there was a lot of turnover through a period that was mentioned in 13, and based on the discussions, I think that they are moving, they have things much better in terms of the accounting, so I hope we don't have that scenario.
Let's hope not, too.
And the other, they did have a benefactor come forward, too, which they mentioned to us. And they
Last
have-
summer. They did.
This
That
summer,
was it?
over the summer.
Wow,
And
okay.
then they had a termination of a position, which gave them back 80,000 plus bennies,
Wow.
which made it, that's where we saw some of the changes in the numbers were reflected by those two things.
That's good to know. That's good, thank you.
But with all this, these stipulations in this year, I think we'll have a clearer picture next season as we make a recommendation. Much clearer than this year because things happen very quickly. But the fact is, they are still seeing the public, and so we still need to, show some support for that.
Absolutely.
And it's still a vital service on the island.
Absolutely. No argument there.
Yeah, so it'll be a good year for us to have a better understanding of what's going on and how things have happened this year, and even it might give us some idea what's happened this past year.
Good, well, that's a good update,
yeah.
because I was kind of curious. All right, very good. Any other questions on that? Okay, I think moving along, then. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so all set. That's it, great. Any other questions? I like that. Okay. I think that concludes this portion. As for the next item on the agenda, review and finalize motion for warrant articles for fiscal year 2015, or the annual, 2015 annual town meeting. I wasn't planning on taking any specific articles, we've been making good progress. But at our next meeting on March 2nd, and I'm looking out at Brian and Martin again, we'll start dealing with some financial articles, I would assume, on that? Everybody's nodding?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I
Actually,
think,
I think a lot of them I just have to look at real quick.
yeah, that's fine. Oh, yeah. So I think, now, we have, if does anybody have any specific questions on any articles today? So- Do you? Going once, twice?
I suppose, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up with Mr. Ryder before, although we've already taken some action, once we meet with Kara, we have the ability to go back and
Yeah,
review.
here's my issue with
Perhaps
it. And my memory is probably the weakest on this committee, but I seem to recall that there was discussion between the two parties. That's, as Kara said, that they were in agreement. Now, I could be wrong, so that's why I asked him, I said, and he said they did not meet. So my thing is trying to be, again, fully transparent, is get both sides in, and let's see. If Kara has one thing in mind, that's great, that's fine. His article is calling for something else, and we may have voted as a committee on what Kara wants, but not what he wants, which isn't fair to him. That's the way I see it now. And I'm going to look at it, this is Arena out there, I don't know if you're nodding your head, but that's, so we just want to get everybody back in. Sure. And again, if we feel so inclined to change, I think that was a unanimous decision, so any of the committee members could bring that up for reconsideration and take it, or we may be satisfied with Kara's explanation, or maybe go from there. So.
Would it be, on this subject, I think there's also an issue of cost, right? I think granite curbing is a lot more expensive than asphalt curbing, as I remember, Kara.
That's true.
And while it makes perfect sense to me that a resident can request that he wants granite curbing by where he lives, is this the process by which the town decides that, well, you get granite curbing, but you get asphalt? And I'm assuming that Kara and the town administration has some sort of criteria that says, well, these are the streets we would prefer to do in granite, and these are the streets that, for cost reasons, we just as soon do in asphalt. And I don't understand, I guess the question is...
Yeah, that certainly seems like a reasonable response, but I think it'd be nice to, I think for our purposes, is that you could to hear that and to see, because I'm sure there is a cost difference. I think, and as I recall, now that you say that, I think Kara did talk a little bit about that, but I don't know if she got any specific. Again, I have to be.
I'm just remembering her, she's saying
Well, that's
it's more
what I'm trying to
expensive,
remember,
so, and I don't know what the, how you judge which streets get which, so.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
No, that was my thought.
That may be the case, but I think that just, I think trying to be as transparent and equitable and fair is that revisiting this topic, I think is appropriate, and we can decide to do after that. But my main thing would have, again, would pick my interest is when he said that there were no discussions. And I was like, well, that's not like my record. So.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, and to Joe's point, I think that there really should be some sort of parameters on how they determine what gets what, because, I mean, you know, if any, you know, citizen of the town comes forward and says, I want granite curbing, there's got to be some precedent that, you know, just, there's got to be some sort of formula that determines what's what.
I would think that, let's say, in the hypothetical world, that we think, oh, we, as a committee, say, yeah, we like granite curbing on Cooper Farm Road. Then I think in a motion, it'd be nice to have a specific appropriation for it, which there isn't now.
Yeah.
And that, and I believe Kara can provide that. So she now, is that the proper mechanism? Maybe not.
Yeah.
No, but it is a warrant article, and I guess from on the surface is that I want to be sure that we are hearing all sides. It goes back to that. Whether or not we change our mind is the story. Steve.
I think, just in response to Joe and to you, Christy, that this is an open town meeting form of government, and this is the appropriate forum for any citizen to request of his fellow citizens to appropriate funds for anything. I mean, I remember attending town meeting in high school, and this was early 2000s, and everybody was flush with cash, and there was actually an article about appropriating funds for a snowmaking machine for Mill Hill Park. Yeah.
My first town meeting.
No,
Sorry,
that was.
Steve, I voted against it. But this committee voted for it.
Yeah. You know, that was silly then, and you know, I would like to hear why granite curbing is more appropriate or less appropriate than the asphalt berms, but I do think that this is the appropriate forum for whatever request.
It is the forum.
No, I'm not being argumentative.
No. I mean, I agree with you.
My thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
You go first.
I was just going to say, Steve, that's legitimate, absolutely. I mean, I think a citizen can come forward with absolutely anything, but the town does need to have some sort of criteria structure to be able to answer these. You know, sewer districts was a perfect example where people were just adding into the sewer district, and they need some sort of criteria so that they can.
I agree, and I think to that point, Mr. Chairman, I think we should, at the same time as we request Kara to come discuss this, we should request that Silvio, the town's engineer, Silvio Gennaro, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Ask him to come and explain why or why not, you know, the pros and cons of each option.
That's a good suggestion.
Well, then just to ask the hypothetical then, because what I'm really trying to get at, Steve, is, so then what is our committee's responsibility? So a citizen has come forth and is asked to have granite curbing, and he gives his reasons why he thinks it's a good idea, aesthetics, safety. Kara gives her cost, not part of our criteria. It's, it rates 7 on a scale of 1 to 6 or whatever. And is our responsibility then to vote, we think Mr. Ryder makes a great case, so we vote to adopt, or we in effect say, if the town wants to spend the money, it's up to the town, so we say, take no action and let the voters decide if they want to force the town to appropriate money for granted. I guess I'm confused as how are we supposed to help steer the town in the right direction?
The way I look at it is as any warrant article is that it is in the bylaws of the charter that this committee can, at its discretion, give a recommendation on any article for town meeting. So, whether or not it's a snow machine, whether or not it's curbing, whether or not it's sewers, whether or not it's zoning, that's a bad example, or financial matters, is that we, at our discretion, can rule on any article. So that being said, looking at this specific article, if this committee, if the majority of this committee feels, members of this committee feel that curbs are a good idea or curbs are a bad idea, then that's the recommendation that can be made.
Okay, so we weigh the information we're given by all parties and make up our own minds.
That's correct, Jim.
Okay.
So for me, and this is a great topic.
Yeah, good time.
You know, because when I was chairman, I didn't feel like the citizens really had a great,
And you worked very hard.
you know, a great avenue, because I felt, you know, we work for town meeting, and one of the things we do is make motions to inform town meeting about what we found out about and and give them a recommendation based on the information we have. And so I think we worked hard to become not the advocate so much for citizens, but to give them, you know, an avenue to bring these forward. So I think on these kinds of things, it's you know, it's maybe a little subjective, but it's a way, it's you know, to give the town voters a you know, our assessment of the issue, and then our recommendation.
And again, before I call, it is the mechanism in place for citizens to have their say at town meeting. Christie, and then if you want to come on up, you got to come on.
As long as it's okay.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
Christie first.
and unfortunately, with as many public meetings as we have, oftentimes we don't hear an opponent until they stand up at town meeting.
Not
You
for
know,
lack of
really,
trying.
really, all it takes is someone to come to public comment, speak for a minute, and leave, and it gives us at least something to think about, you know? So that doesn't happen. So we go on what we're given.
Steve, and then Savarino.
Joe, I think to further answer your question, with respect to this article, what I'd like to see is this committee ask for and get back some tangible answers in terms of what are the costs and what are the benefits. You know, if Kara can tell us these are the costs for the berm, these are the costs for the granite curbing, and then the engineer, or maybe it's Mike Burns, the traffic coordinator, you know, somebody can explain what's the relative safety benefits of one versus the other. That's the information I think I would need and that's the information I'd like to put in the comment. If we give it a yes or a no, and we say, no, it's not worth $1.4 million extra because the engineer says, you know, this one's all right. So anyway, that's what I'd like to say.
Right. That's fine. And again, we haven't taken a motion, just to expound on your point. So, this is Savarino.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you, members. I just wanted to give a little background because I don't see anyone here that can give you any of that at the moment. And I know that's what you're looking to do on March 2nd, but Kara wasn't around to give you this perspective either. So I'll just share it with you. You can do with it what you want. But probably about 10 plus years ago, there was an initiative put together with the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the School Committee. And it came about as a result of diminishing financial resources. The bus system, busing all the children to school, drew a definitive line that said we weren't going to pick you up whether it was a mile or a mile and a half. Whatever the circle around the school was, the buses were only going to pick you up outside of that district. So it forced a lot of children to start walking to school that weren't eligible for the bus. And when that happened, the three agencies, Selectmen, School Committee, and Finance Committee, got together and said, we need to improve access for these kids to walk to school on safe sidewalks with curbing and crosswalks and the like, so that the town isn't liable for the decision. And that's when Hooper Farm sidewalk was constructed. And it was done on the cheap, Joe. It was done with a Cape Cod berm and asphalt. And if you look at it today, it's an eyesore. The second sidewalk that was constructed was Vesper Lane. And that was done with granite curbing and asphalt sidewalks. And it's a much better, more durable sidewalk. It looks as good today as when it was constructed, which you can't say about Hooper Farm Road. So I think the citizens on Hooper Farm Road feel like, you know, it's time maybe that we brought our sidewalk up to
to the standard that Vesper Lane is. And to go a little bit further, Donald's article, we really should talk about doing something on First Way, but of course the article has some restrictions on it. But the way that children walk to school needs to be safe. And there's no doubt in my mind that granite curbing is safer. We can have all the consultants you want, and I would support that if that's what you want to do. But just ask the planners. We don't have to go too far, and they'll tell you. The reason you see Cape Cod berm is because it's a cost-cutting measure. It's cheaper, but it certainly peels, as Mr. Ryder said, peels up like butter. So to your point, Joe, about what should the Finance Committee do and what should the standards be, one of the things I hope that you will consider is taxpayer money should be used. Sometimes it might cost a little more at the beginning of the project, but you might get 100 years out of it, as opposed to you'll save a little bit of money at the beginning of the project, but in 5 years we're doing it again, and that's what Hooper Farm Road is a great example of. So thank you for your time. I look forward to March 2nd, and I'm glad that you'll give Mr. Ryder an opportunity to be reheard on that.
Yeah, I think with that, we want to arrange that to be sure that Kara will be able to join us, and Sylvia. Any other questions on that, or any other articles, I guess, in general?
I have some draft comments from those articles. I don't know if you want.
I didn't send them out yet. I didn't
you
see
want
it because we got plenty of time. Oh, you have them copies?
I got copies. If you want, if you want to just, do you want to see it first, or how do you want to work it?
No, it's fine. It's for all of us. I was just saying, the reason I had this pass them out there because I didn't plan on talking about this today.
Okay. There's actually 2 pages for you. I took a stab at it.
And again, with this, I think it's more for review. I think we'll take up voting on this. 2 pages?
Yes, there's
we'll
3.
take up voting on this when we come back.
I actually wrote a comment for number 92, too. I kind of got going.
That's fine.
There you go. All motivated and stuff. Good.
That's good, Joe.
Do you have any extras for that?
Sure. Well, actually,
I don't know.
I made 5 of them, Tim.
No. Mine will go in the record, though.
You pass it, it needs to go.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to the record, yeah. In fact, I will give it to you, Mark. Yeah. Okay. You want to look at this one, Tim? Yeah. That's very good. I just glad through it. Looks good. And again, and we can certainly talk about it, but this is not on the agenda specifically. We won't take a vote.
Okay. Well, I just, again, I was more as with John's last time. I just thought, since I've never done this before, it'd be worth getting people's comments and reactions to form, substance, too much, not enough, whatever. So.
And actually, and again, the same thing with John passed out will also be on Monday, the 2nd, too. So, okay, very good. Any comments on that? Look pretty good. Any other articles, any questions? So, if none, we're in good shape with the articles. Meeting on March 2nd, where we'll start with number 1 and move forward. And in addition, we'll take up Article 40 to discuss that again. And Article 89, I believe, is the Mill Hill article. I think it's 89. Mr. Atherton is going to give a chat on that. Yeah, 89 and 90. Give the selectmen's perspective on that. And then we'll start with Article 1 and move forward.
If there is any lingering questions on the human services allocations that sort of come to mind after the fact, feel free to bring them up in a meeting and we'll try to answer them.
I just have a procedural question, I guess. I read the report. It said the town manager has identified an increase in the budget from, I don't know the numbers exactly, 317,000 to 350,000. That's set before you guys determine what the need is, and then you allocate the money afterwards. Because it seems like the narrative that comes from the contract review committee is we feel we're adequately servicing the need. But if the budget's determined before you review what the need is,
well, it's realized this year, but we really were going for the request last year. It was a little late to put in, and so I think the committee last year was content with their recommendations, But with the fact that we were going to follow up the following year, this year, with a funding increase.
Okay.
So it wasn't based on this year, it was really, actually, it's been based on a few years, but.
But within a few percentage points, one way or the other, you think $350,000 is pretty adequate for the needs of all of these organizations?
Yeah, I do. I tend to be pretty conservative on the committee as far as allocations. Understanding the financial demands on the town, especially some years back when money was really tough. But if you ask the police chief, a dollar spent on public safety is $2 saved in the human services. So I think that there's a lot of merit to it, and I think with as we meet with the human services, they all, we're talking about a lot of volunteers. There's a lot of staff too, but they really work hard to make things better in the community, and we haven't really shown an increase in quite a while. The allocations and the recommendations the last few years were very, very difficult to make because you're trying to really fulfill what they're requesting. Yeah. But we still want to do it with a critical eye, that we're not just giving them additional. And this year, I feel pretty good. There's some that we, dropped down a little bit because of other funding that they're getting. So yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So hearing none, then the date of the next meeting is Monday, March 2nd. I believe we'll be here at 4 p.m. And until that time, everybody enjoy the break if you're going away. And we're all set. So, motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Great.
Very good.
Oh, that's right. So
That's quick. I like that.
So we're off for the week. I will do my my comment for the two funeral.
The foundation will still full of ice and snow.
Great.
Got more than that. Got more than we did yesterday.
But I did know